All right. So, on the heels of learning about a cumulative relative frequency, let's learn about an ogive graph. So, an ogive graph is a two-dimensional chart with categories on the horizontal axis, okay, the x-axis, and the cumulative relative frequency on the vertical axis. The horizontal axis categories are listed from left to right in the same order as the categories in the frequency table from top to bottom. So, um, so this comment here is that notice that in this frequency table that we've got here, oops, where did my table disappear to? Ah, okay. In this frequency table that we've got here, notice that, I've got ethnicity ordered in a certain way from top to bottom. Now the order matters because the cumulative relative frequency is based off of this order. Okay. And so you'll notice that, because we have these ethnicities arranged in this order, the cumulative relative frequency is increasing up to 100%. Okay. So that'll be important here when I show the graph, the ogive graph. The cumulative relative frequency vertical axis is scaled from either 0 to 1 or 0% to 100%. The minimum value can vary, but the maximum is no more than 1 or 100%. Each cumulative relative frequency is plotted with a point. The points are connected by lines to serve as visual guides for the eye. Typically, grid lines and figures are avoided, but in ogive charts, horizontal grid lines are useful to interpret the data. Or grid lines can be removed and data labels put on each point instead. So, here's that frequency table. So we have our categorical column with a frequency column next to it, a relative frequency column next to that, and then a cumulative relative frequency column on the very end. So an ogive graph means we're going to be graphing these points in this cumulative relative frequency column. And so here's an example of an ogive graph. So you'll notice how the ethnicities are white, Hispanic, Black, Asian, multiracial, American Indian, and Pacific Islander, though that same arrangement from top to bottom is the same from left to right, right? White, white, Hispanic, Hispanic, Black, Black, Asian, Asian, multiracial, multiracial, American Indian, American Indian, Pacific Islander, Pacific Islander. Okay. And so the cumulative relative frequency under the white ethnicity was 63.8%. So I plotted a point above the white category at 63.8%. Now, I decided not to go with horizontal grid lines. Instead, I put what's called a data label. So I actually labeled the value of this point exactly. And I did that because I had room for it. Okay, and it works. So then we've got the Hispanic ethnicity second, and the cumulative relative frequency is now 80.2%. So here for Hispanic, we've got 80.2%. Then for Black, the cumulative relative frequency is 92.5. So here's Black, 92.5. Asian, 97.3. Asian, 97.3. Multiracial, 99.1. Multiracial, 99.1. American Indian, 99.8. American Indian, 99.8. Then finally, Pacific Islander, 100%. Pacific Islander, 100%. So, what this is kind of showing is that, I chose not to graph it from zero, okay, because zero would be down here. So going from 0 to 63.8, that shows the greatest increase, right? Which means the greatest proportion of the white ethnicity, or is the white ethnicity, with 63.8% of the population. Then you can see the next largest is Hispanic, which is 16.4% of the population. So 16.4% is kind of represented by the rise to the next point. And then the transition from Hispanic to Black, okay, the Black ethnicity is represented by 12.3% of the population, and that is represented in the height from the Hispanic data point to the Black data point here. And so you can see that to get to the next data point, you don't have to go as high. Okay, you don't have to go as high. You don't have to go as high. It's because you've got, a reduction in the relative frequency here. So when we go from American Indian to Pacific Islander, that's a rise of just 0.2. So we go from 99.8 and we go up 0.2%, and that gets us to 100. So, it looks like the line of this graph is just leveling off because there isn't much of a rise to each point to get to the next one. Okay. And these lines that are drawn between the points, these just serve as visual guides for the eye, just so that you can see this pattern of it increasing and then leveling off to 100% here. Okay. So that's the definition of an OGIF graph. Let me know if you have any questions.